Okay, good evening, councillors. Last actual in-person committee meeting of this council term, so welcome. First item on the agenda this evening, minutes. Do I have your authorisation to sign the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 13th of March 2023 as a correct record of those proceedings?
Thank you
very much. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. We have apologies from Councillor Earl Williams.
Yes, apologies received from Councillor Earl Williams, and Councillor Mrs Barnes is present as her substitute.
Okey-dokey. Welcome, Mary. Additional agenda items, there are none. Disclosures of interest. Anything on the agenda that members feel they need to declare? Councillor Maynard. Okey-dokey, thank you. Any more? No? Good. Oh, Councillor Field, are you similar to Councillor Maynard?
I don't know, I couldn't hear him, but possibly.
Yeah, he declared on the environmental strategy, just in case anything come up with County Council.
Well, ditto then.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good. Right. Item 5, report of the Climate Change Steering Group. You'll see this is the first item on the agenda because Councillor Field has an annual meeting to attend tonight. I understand that you're incapacitated due to a busted ankle or something like that, which is a bit of an extreme thing to do to get out of delivering leaflets.
Yes, but it is broken.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, commiserations on that. Right, what have we got? Summarise the work of the Climate Change Steering Group and address the climate emergency since the public meeting. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this report summarises the work of the Climate Change Steering Group, which has been carried out since the 1st of April last year, so 22 until 31st of March this year. Members will remember that the steering group was established after the Council declared a climate emergency in 2019, and the group is responsible for overseeing the progress of the environment strategy. This is a short report on the work of the steering group over the last year. The group meets monthly, and a link to the minutes of these meetings has been provided in the report and is available on the Rother District Council website. The report details a number of projects which have been completed in the last year, overseen by the steering group. I'm not going to go through each project in turn, but I'd like to draw attention to just a couple. The first being the council emissions baselining, which was reported last year in July 2022. And there are a number of projects also relating to tree planting in Bexhill, which has resulted in the publication of the tree planting strategy for Bexhill. There are a number of ongoing projects as well. Members will be familiar with the Village Halls Energy Project, electric vehicles charging points, the ongoing work with parish and town councils to declare climate emergency and take climate action. And then finally, the biodiversity audit of the council's owned green assets to provide a baseline and recommendations for biodiversity enhancement across the district. The steering group has also received a number of reports ranging from the emissions report I just mentioned, but also updates from the Green Team and other officer climate action, such as sustainable procurement and active travel for business mileage. So in conclusion, as I said, it's a brief report. The Climate Change Steering Group has met on 10 occasions over the past year and has overseen the development and implementation of the projects mentioned and reporting work progress on the environment strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Field, anything you wish to add as chairman of the group?
I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you so much to the officer team who've supported this, Elise and Lucy, who are inspirational, and also to Ben and to Julie Holland, who clerks it for us, and also to the steering group. I think they're a very lively and thoughtful and thought-provoking group of people. But it's not just the steering group who've come to the meetings. Other members have come and contributed and are always very welcome. I think the three main things really are the village halls, that we are outward looking and looking to help village halls with their carbon neutrality and get them off grid for heating with solar panels, etc. Very pleased with the tree planting strategy, and it's a really interesting read and easy to read if anybody would like to look at it, and I think everybody should. And finally, electric vehicle charging points have been a long time in the gestation. I think they're probably on their way, and I think we can all be really glad that's happening. It's taken longer than I would have hoped, but it's on its way, and we're getting funding, I believe, or perhaps I shouldn't have said that because it's not quite in yet. But Ben is smiling. Ben looks confident. So yes, thank you to the group, thank you to the officers. I think it's been a very productive 4 years on the climate emergency front. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just mentioned on the EV, the electric vehicle charging points, just in case there's anybody from Rye who's watching this, and there probably isn't, but maybe there is. There's a reason that the Rye points at the moment aren't going forward, and that is basically there isn't enough electric in Rye, believe it or not, for proper charging points. To get that, power networks need to upgrade some local substations to boost the juice, if you like, and that's possibly a cost to them of some £500,000 or more, and it is in the pipeline to be done by 2025, we hope. Is that right, Lucy? Can you quote that, or can I quote that?
I had a slightly different date. I had 2026, but I may be wrong.
It may be 2026, but there it is. It's not. If anybody from Rye is sort of thinking, oh, well, that's it, typical Battle and Bexhill, they all get their charging points, but we don't. Well, it's not down to us. It's down to there ain't enough juice to run them. So at this moment in time, that's where we are. But we can try. And I think one other thing I will mention, if you look at number 12 on the agenda, page 5, you'll see young Ben here set a target of 100 cycles to work. It doesn't mean just a sort of a round trip. This is a cycle, like on a push bike. So he did a fair bit, and I think, did you get 87 or something in the end? 87. He got 87 bike rides to work. I did say is that bike rides there and back, but it's each day. So possibly 160 actual bike rides.
Actual bike rides, yeah.
So that's not bad going. That's almost as many as me. So that's good. Anything you want to say on that or not? No. Well, I think it was only something that Ben wanted to do, just to sort of try the green thing, if you like, to see. So he lives in Hastings, so coming to work is easy enough along the seafront and the cycle path, which isn't too bad. But he's also been out into the depths of the district and found out that there are some quite lumpy hills around Robertsbridge and Burwash and Brighton and everywhere else. And when he and when he feels like he's had enough and wants to catch a bus, he's then found out that the bus do not allow a cycle on a bus. So if you're lucky at the right time, you might be able to get on a train with a bike, but definitely not a bus.
Although I would say, Chairman, Three Oaks train station is very small. Yeah. I didn't realise that until I got there, but you have to be in the front carriage of the train to be able to get off.
Yeah.
So I soon found myself in Rye.
Nothing wrong with Rye, except if it's not Three Oaks. So there. Anybody? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I probably ought to declare an interest as chairman of Etchingham Parish Council, but in a sense the points I want to make go slightly wider than my own ward. The first is, of course, we do have, and perhaps I ought to declare an interest as a trustee of Etchingham Trust for Sport and Recreation as well. We do have village halls that are shared ownership with other people, and that's a complexity, which I think we ought just to mention, because clearly that's going to be a problem going forward. In this case, it's the diocese, and there may be others in the rural area that are shared ownership, which will pose the same sort of problems. The second point is one which, again, I think is a work point for the future. But these charging points are essentially urban. And yet, actually, where cars are going to be most needed are out in the rural area. You have buses in towns, you can usually walk in towns or cycle. Out in the rural areas, the car remains essential. And yet, our charging points are not going to be there. So I think that's a very real problem for the next council to face. The last one really is to ask a question about the biodiversity audit. I welcome the fact we're doing it across the council's estate, but if we're talking about biodiversity net gain, we really need to find a wider way of measuring biodiversity across multiple owners. And that seems to me, again, something which I hope is going on, but I don't see anything in the report about it. So I'm going to ask a question about that. What is happening to establish biodiversity audit across the district as opposed to our own estate?
Okay. There are a couple of different points there, one being the funding of the biodiversity audit itself. But yes, in answer to the first question, not even district-wide, but across the county, there is work being done by, it's done by East Sussex, by the Record Centre, essentially, the Biodiversity Record Centre, looking at mapping the nature recovery strategy for the whole of Sussex, so west and east as well, and within that, they'll be looking at certain areas for biodiversity enhancement. So when we're looking at biodiversity net gain, where would be the best places to do this? Yes, so it is happening. The responsible body for that is looking at Sussex-wide as a legal requirement for the nature recovery strategies. And so for our part, for the council's part rather, it's looking at those specific assets that it can change the management of, in this sense. And it's also looking at it on its own assets in terms of should the council decide to develop and be in need of biodiversity net gain credits, there's the option to do it on council-owned land first rather than paying a third party for that credit. I think that addresses it.
I think also on the sort of EV charging points, I can see, I get it, but I don't get it, if you know what I mean. My sort of thoughts are, if we went back 60, 70, 80 years, would the local council be putting in petrol stations? The answer would be no, because of companies signing to sell fuel would put in fuel stations. So why should a council be putting in charging points for electric vehicles? To me, it should be, power generators or, your Shell and your BP and everybody else. If they see a market, then that's what they're going to sell their products, especially with the power generators, EDF and that. To me, they make the products and they want to sell it to someone who's got an electric car. That's how they're going to make their money.
I think Joseph Chamberlain would have disagreed with you.
I don't know, Joseph. I wasn't around when Joseph Chamberlain was. So. But anyway, so that would be my thoughts. And the other thing, I suppose that if you're in the countryside, you're more likely got a driveway where you would park your EV car and charge it on your own driveway. And I know that some sort of B&B places now and your Airbnbs are obviously sticking a charger on the wall, so that if people are coming from afar, they can charge your car up so they can actually get home again. So, but that's my fault. Councillor Barnes, it's going to be a long night tonight.
I really must disagree with you. When you go to rural villages, because many of the houses were built before the car existed, they don't actually normally have driveways. If you go to Burwash High Street or Edgecombe High Street, you will find a large number of houses without driveways. And some of them are concreting over their garden, if they've got a large enough front garden, in order to provide a driveway. But there are others where they're really literally onto the road with a very small strip in front. There are a large number of rural properties without driveways that weren't built for cars.
Well, you could then argue that an EV ain't no good to them, ultimately. But there it is. P.S. I live in a village. So, Ben wants to come in, then I've got Councillor Cortell.
I just want to sort of jump in on the EV charging point before we start off a big debate about it, really. I think it's about understanding the roles that each of the partners play. And there is a specific role for us as a district council. We have, at the moment, it's around our car parks where we can easily facilitate this infrastructure. East Sussex County Council are doing a lot of work on street charging. And I know that a lot of the parish councils are starting to look at facilitating that through their own car parks, or, especially where we've devolved car parks and other such things. And so I think it's about, all the various levels of local government coming together to try and meet the infrastructure needs. But I think Councillor Osborne has a very good point that also there's a big area for the private sector to kind of come in and do something with this eventually. And I think they will, once the saturation of electric cars gets to a point where it makes it commercially viable. I think when we first wrote the environment strategy, we did a DVLA check and there was 14 registered electric vehicles in the entire district of Rother. Now, we've seen how much that's changed over the last 4 years, what will happen in another 4 years and 4 years after that. So it's about following the progression, but I think it's about also recognising that each local government partner plays its role, and it's about working together to try and meet the needs where we identify them.
Councillor Cortell, you indicate.
Yes, I largely agree with Ben there. As a social democrat, I would say that we need to stimulate the market where the private sector is being a little bit slow, and we won't meet our climate change objectives if we wait for the private sector. So I think facilitating the infrastructure is extremely important. Before getting to the point I wanted to make, I'd just like to reiterate that I think we've had two excellent officers, Lucy and Elise, working on the climate strategy, and it's made a terrific difference. And I also commend Councillor Field for having welcomed members who are not on the steering group to participate in meetings, and I'm very thankful for that. Now, to get on to my question, it's about measurement, it's about baselining. I noticed it's in 6A, and Lucy mentioned it, and so did Councillor Barnes. We've got an indication that some baselining measurement has been carried out. It would be nice in the next report to see some figures. What is the baseline? What has each completed project added to the baseline, or rather subtracted from the baseline? And if we could see an ongoing calculation, both of our own estate and of the wider district, that would be excellent.
Thank you, Councillor. Those baselining figures that I've mentioned in there were reported to ONS in November. The update on the environment strategy has the actual calculations for the total for the council. The district-wide emissions haven't been reported yet, will be reported in September. We are using the then Bayes, now DESNES data, which has a lag. So we will expect to see that that data come through in July, I believe it is. So that will be reported after that. In terms of the reduction based on each project is slightly harder to quantify. So if you think about the Bexhill tree planting strategy or any of the projects that are currently on that list, it's much harder to put an accurate figure on, and I wouldn't want to mislead in any way. But where possible, yes, the different actions we will put next to them going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that it? Yep. Good. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much. Going very quickly back to the EV charging points, of course, Battle, Bexhill and Canberra are all tourist destinations, and people, when researching where they are going to go and where they're going to park their cars, will be very interested to know that our car parks have EV charging points, which will give us a little bit of income and actually will also boost the tourists coming to Battle, Bexhill and Canberra. So I think it's quite right in a way that we are encouraging and supporting the introduction of EV charging points in those areas. My comment is our climate action report, April 2021 to March 2022, refers to the carbon literacy training. Is this likely to be repeated for the new council members?
I've got an agenda point about this in the Climate Change Steering Group on Thursday. So Elise and I are now trained carbon literacy trainers, so we can deliver this in-house rather than paying an external. So I'm hoping that we will be able to roll it out. I've just completely ruined my agenda point for Thursday now, for much wider. We've got access to the members' toolkit. So carbon literacy has a number of different toolkits for different audiences. We have the members, elected members, sorry. We have senior management and leadership. We have generic staff. And carbon literacy are just rolling out a parish and town council toolkit as well, which we will be able to offer to parish and town councils. So I'm really looking forward to rolling that out.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add my thanks to everyone for this. I'm so delighted by the progress that's been made. Ben, Elise and Lucy, you are truly inspiring. But also to Catherine Field, who chairs our meetings so very well. I'm really pleased with the progress, particularly as the pandemic set us back so much these 4 years. The tree planting's been brilliant, but I wanted to reassure people that we are still continuing to look after the trees. There are about 1,000 young whips, well, more than 1,000 really, more like 2,000 up on Bexhill Down. And alternate Saturdays, a small group of us go and we mulch the trees and just look after them. The big trees in the streets are still cared for by Trees for Cities. I think there's a 3-year contract for those, but just big thanks to everyone.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? No? Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to come back on electric vehicle charging points to say that we did promise when we started this project that it would be at no capital cost to the council. Therefore, where we put them, as well as being dictated by is there enough electricity or not, is also dictated about where the funding will pay. It's also important, as Councillor Cook said, to remember that it isn't just for the residents, it's also for visitors, which of course applies in rural areas. And to that end, there is enormous potential, which I think we are beginning to explore, for village halls to install them, because many councils do this. Village halls have them in their car parks. Anyone can use them, but the village halls also get some income, which I think is a good way forward for all of us, especially in the rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the recommendation is the report be noted. So do I have a proposer? I'll take Councillor Gray as a proposer, as you're a green personage. And a seconder, Councillor Barnes. Thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thank you.
Item 6, call-in and urgency procedures, page 7 to 14. Ben's going to just take this, but I've got a question.
Thank you, Chairman.
It just says on page 12, we've noticed the third one down, the call-in deadline, 5 clear working days, publication, chairman of the OSC or any 2 non-executive members, one of whom must have been present at the cabinet meeting. Would that be in person or online?
And I don't know.
And he doesn't know. So,
what I can tell you is I've been reassured that there's no recommended changes to the call-in and urgency procedures, and it has not been used a single time this civic year in comparison to the 2 previous years when it was twice each per year. So I think other than the fact that I'm not writing reports that people want to call in, I think it's working quite well.
I would agree. Any questions on this one? No? No? Councillor Cortell?
The any 2 non-executive members who can call it in paragraph 6, do these have to be members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, or can there be anyone who's not on the executive?
Any non-executive member, as long as one is present at the meeting.
Okay. My second point, and it's just a comment, is that I would guess that it's extremely unlikely that a member of an administration, any administration, would call in a cabinet decision. And in effect, this is therefore the prerogative of the opposition. Just an observation.
I think it's really important to understand that as a scrutiny committee, the job is to scrutinise the executive. So it goes away from party politics, from being opposition and that to being executive and non-executive members, and that's why it's framed as such. So, it's not unheard of that a member of the same political party will call in a decision of the executive. And it's every right of a non-executive member to do that where they disagree with the decision of an of the executive. And I think that's a really clear distinction about the function of this committee. It's not a political decision-making body. It's not a political committee. It's one that's about scrutinising the executive in its function as the executive versus the function of the scrutiny committee. So that's all I'd say. It's not necessarily about politics in that case.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that there have been a couple of occasions this year that I've asked the question, at a cabinet meeting, because I attend probably 90%, 95% of them in person for that sole purpose of making sure I'm here. And there have been a couple of times when I've sort of asked a question of, something's going through, and I just think, well, is that right? So I asked the question first. And I've been given the answer. That then, if someone questioned me and says, should that be called in, I can then say, well, I've asked so and so, and that was already, it's already approved, and blah blah blah. So that's that's how I've sort of worked. So no, I think as Ben says, it's not necessarily political. You could have, obviously, the position is there that you could, but it's not. It's pretty good this year.
I think historically this committee's been particularly good at not being partisan in its approach, and long may that continue.
Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it would be maybe good for the next terms overview and scrutiny training if the sort of advantages of calling in were sort of emphasised more, especially I guess, from an administration perspective, it can make the administration's policies stronger if they're constantly scrutinising the policies of their colleagues and stuff. So it's not always, it's call in, not criticise, isn't it? So it's a really useful tool, actually, and maybe the council should be using it more to make sure everything is ratified and solid. So I think that could really feature in the training next term a bit more.
Any more? No. Again, this report is to be noted. Someone want to move that one? Councillor Madeley, seconded Councillor Barnes. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 7, page 15. This is my report, drafted by Louise, so I won't claim it that much. This is to, as it says, inform members of the work of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee from April 22 to March 23, and the recommendation resolved that the contents of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee draft annual report to the Council be considered and recommended as appropriate to Council whenever that is. So, what I would say is thank you to the committee. Thank you for the work you've had. If you read through this, we have done a ton of work, to be honest. Some of our meetings have been over the 3-hour bracket by a little bit, which is quite extreme, to be honest. But it's better to do that than come back the next day for half an hour. I'd just like to thank Louise for the work she puts in and for writing this up as well, and Ben and the support of the officers across the district, and obviously your support in attending the meetings and debating and voting. So I would thank you for that. So does someone want to move the office of the recommendation? Councillor Cook, seconded, and go on.
There are a couple of things which I was looking for which really didn't quite figure. One is I thought we had decided that really, as an observer member of the Health and Wellbeing Board, I rather regret that we're an observer member, but there's nowhere where I can report back to at the moment, and I thought we'd begun to work out that really this body was the one who should receive a report at least once a year from the Health and Wellbeing Board. They don't do an annual report, so it would be important, whoever represents us on it next year, to know that they have that task. And I think we ought to catch that recommendation in the report.
Chairman, as Councillor Barnes Health and Wellbeing Board, I'm obviously a member of the Health and Wellbeing Board through wearing my East Sussex County Councillor hat as lead member of Adult Social Care and Health. So at that point, I would like to declare an interest in regard to that, personal, non-prejudicial.
It's also would be helpful when that report is coming up to know something about what is being done by the local strategic partnership. And so it seems to me that it would be in accordance with what the Health and Wellbeing Task Force recommended, that we do have a slot on the agenda where we do look at public health and the work of those two bodies.
It is actually on the items for consideration on the last page, so maybe that could be considered by in about 5 minutes' time. I've got Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want, in response to some of the comments that Councillor Barnes has just made, of course, one thing that I think that we've firmed up on during this term is whereby we have called people to the Scrutiny Committee to give presentations, and they've been really useful, not just for members of the Scrutiny Committee, but to other members of the authority. It's something we've always done, actually, to be fair, but sometimes I think they can be really informative. And whether in the past, I think, to be fair, we used to invite people to the council to do that. For those of us who have been around a very long time in this chamber will remember non-decision-making debate, which sometimes used to go on a bit, when it's a bit more structured and where you have the opportunity to ask questions and answers in a scrutiny setting rather than a full council setting. I think, frankly, it's better. But perhaps I've been a little verbose in the way I've responded to what Councillor Barnes said. But I think that it is within the auspices of this committee to obviously call people to come and present if there's an item of local interest. Clearly, for example, if there was a public health issue that you thought that this committee should have the opportunity to debate and have an ability to do that, clearly has an ability to do that, then there is nothing to stop this committee from inviting the Director of Public Health at East Sussex County Council to come along and speak about something or present about something. And as I said, I've declared an interest, but I'm sure through you, Chairman, I'm more than happy. Yeah, I'm more than happy, obviously, to take that away as well in terms of some of the other comments that Councillor Barnes has made, because, as I say, we do have that opportunity to invite people to come to speak if there's a topic of interest that not just this committee has to consider, but we think would be of wider interest to this authority.
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't mean to distract you. I was just going to say there's also an element that we could discuss in the next agenda item when we're looking at future recommendations for the work programme about how that might fit in. So,
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. It's often said that Scrutiny is only as good as its membership. I've been very impressed in the last 12 months, the enthusiasm and commitment of the members who have been on these working groups, and the quality of some of the reports you've had back, I think, have been excellent. And also, I want to be the first one to thank you for your chairmanship the last 12 months, because it's been excellent. You've kept us all under control. You've done your best to keep it under 3 hours, but occasionally we just crept over. But I really would like to thank you for your chairmanship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Councillor Mrs Barnes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. For the last goodness knows how many years, I've been the Rother representative on HOSC, which of course is the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee of ESHT. And sometimes I feel that there should be more of an opportunity to report back on some of the recommendations that are coming out of that committee. I'm not quite certain, because I'm not sure of the role that the Health and Wellbeing Committee is, where the crossover could be. But I think there should be an opportunity when major decisions, like, for example, when the new mental health unit was approved for Bexhill. And at the moment, at the last meeting, we were discussing childhood cancers, for example. Now, all this is lovely, but it feeds back into ESHT. And as the Rother representative, there are times when I feel that I ought to be reporting back to Rother. I don't know quite if this is the vehicle for it, but I am aware of that. The other thing I'd like to say is this is a very important committee, and I'm usually fairly horrified to see how few councillors actually, who are not on the committee, attend. You know, when we are making important decisions, it is, you know, it's a pity that we can't have more members of the council actually coming in and feeding in, allowing a comment. So that's me.
Do I see someone else? Oh, Councillor Courtell.
Yes, following on from Councillor Barnes, I did read somewhere in your very thorough report that 200 people have at one point or other listened into this committee online, which I think is great news. The points I wanted to make, first of all, in paragraph 22 about the Town Hall Renaissance project, we agreed at the July meeting to defer a set of recommendations till the results of public engagement could be reported. Unfortunately, we've never seen the results of this public engagement. There was also a financial document which was never discussed, and I hope that those two things will re-emerge and be properly scrutinised when the new council continues to discuss this project. My second point is paragraph 30. How do we follow up changes to car park signage. I mean, my concern as an outgoing councillor is that they may not happen or be delayed by a considerable amount. Do we have a mechanism for following up things like changes to car park signage? And my third point is, from reading the relevant section of the Equality Act, we should have embraced our socio-economic duty automatically as a matter of statute. It's great that the Cabinet approved it at the last meeting, but in fact we had a duty as a civic organisation to take account of it right through the last 4 years.
I think on the first one, the Town Hall Renaissance, that, am I right in thinking that because it didn't get planning permission, ground to a halt?
Yeah, I think the executive members in charge of it decided that it wasn't the time to progress, given that the planning committee had concerns about it and rejected the proposals, and that it should be picked up by the new council as to what or what not happens to that building. I think, given that, it felt sort of needless to bring it back for a debate around that when both the financial position and the likely public opinion position will change in the intervening 6 to 9 months. At which point, I'm sure, if any progression is made on that scheme, then another round of that would happen. In terms of the car parks, if I may, Chairman, my suggestion, without being too blunt, is that you contact your ward member, and I'm sure the candidates of Bexhill Central Ward will be pleased to hear me say that. Contact your ward member should you have any concerns if the council aren't following up on those things in the new council.
Does a ward member progress that?
I think basically. Go for Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious of running this meeting into the early hours of the morning, but I just wanted to clarify on Councillor Cortell's point about the socio-economic duty, only because I've done quite a lot of work researching this, hence I brought it forward and everything. The socio-economic duty it's not part of the Equalities Act in England. It was considered for it, but it was only adopted by the devolved administrations in Scotland and Wales. Hence, there's a national campaign for local authorities to voluntarily adopt it, and as this council has. So I'm not sure where Councillor Cortell's read that.
Councillor Mooney, your last committee meeting after, 24 years? 4 years.
Yes, that's right. What a wonderful experience it's been. It's very interesting about car parking signage. I was called to the health centre a few months ago, and I knew from verbal information, that Wainwright Road is somewhere around there, I'd park there. But I hadn't the faintest idea where I was going. But thankfully, there was a big car parking centre at the health centre, so I was okay. So I would take the councillor's Cortell's point, and if he lobby his local member, that we need a signage somewhere in some car parks in Bexhill. Thank you very much.
Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and I don't want this to sound like a sort of an Oscar speech, but I think it is right and proper that we do pay tribute to not only yourself for not just the year that you've chaired this committee, but I'm sure most members around the table will be aware that you're in fact you've been in, it's a bit like the hokey cokey in terms that you've been in and out of the job for a very long time, and I certainly did it and enjoyed it for 5 years, but you are the longest serving chairman of a scrutiny committee that Rother's had since the executive system came in 2001. So I think it's right and proper that this committee formally records its thanks to you not just for this year, but for the entirety of this term in particular. This may or may not be your last scrutiny meeting as a scrutiny chair or even a councillor, but I think it's proper that we record our thanks. Also, and you've just taken Councillor Mooney there and invited him to speak, but the fact of the matter is that Councillor Mooney, during his time on the council, has been a chairman of when we used to have 2 scrutiny committees, he chaired the Resources Scrutiny Committee for very long time, and 24 years on the council is no mean feat. Councillor Mooney is one of the few, as we called ourselves, the 99ers, who started 24 years ago. In her absence, I'd also like to thank Councillor Mrs Earl Williams for obviously her contribution, particularly the last year, because also, whilst there was a little bit of a gap, she's also been a councillor for nearly 24 years. And without further ado, obviously, there are the other member of this committee obviously standing down from the council. Although we very rarely agree, I certainly admire his attention to detail, so I'd like to formally thank Councillor Cortell for the contribution that he's made over the past 4 years to this committee. Thank
you. Yeah, well said. Can't disagree with that. And thank you very much. So, it's been moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by... No, it was moved by Councillor Mooney, wasn't it? I think I moved by Councillor Mooney, seconded by Councillor Cook. All those in favour of my report? That's carried. Thank you very much. What have we got now? Work Programme Review 8, page 29. So, what we got? Consider the work programme, make recommendations for consideration by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the 23-24 civic year. Resolve that this committee review the current work programme, make recommendations for priority considerations by the new committee following the elections. So I would assume you would like on there somewhere an update on the Health and Wellbeing Board once a year.
Yes, but it's not just the Health and Wellbeing Board, it's really a session that is looking at the health and wellbeing in the district and bringing in the work of the local strategic partnership as well as the Health and Wellbeing Board. Quite what we call it, I think, is open to discussion, but if we can slip that session in, it would be very useful. And it should be annual, I think, not more frequent.
I think the idea of bringing this report was through to here was not necessarily to tell the next committee what to do, but it was to give a steer, a bit of a basic guidance, if you know what I mean. Anything to add, Ben?
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the health and wellbeing bit that you picked up, Councillor Barnes, obviously we did the task and finish group, which you sat on and sort of made those recommendations. They are going to be reviewed both in year 1 and year 3. So actually we can make sure, and I'll make sure to make a note that we draft in a sort of an update on the Health and Wellbeing Board as part of that. I think that way it kind of brings it into a context then as to what the LSP is doing, what we're doing as a council, and what our other bodies are doing as well. In terms of, this report, a lot of things have been sat on the wish to do list for a while, and it was more just, no good deed goes unpunished, does it? And I sort of sat down and read through all of the bits that we've done and things, and just sort of made some recommendations really on things that we could take off and clear some space ready for the next council to make their own, to set their own agenda really. And I think there's a couple of things, the annual review, the 6-monthly review of the what is currently known as the environment strategy is being recommended to be removed. That's not to say that it's not important, but there's going to be a new climate strategy coming forward over the next year. So that will recommend, and that will then have an action plan attached to it, which will recommend in its own right a reporting frequency for that, probably annual, as part of the State of the District. We're also introducing the State of the District report, which in itself will probably take a whole meeting, as we pick through, as the Scrutiny Committee picks through that, and that will cover a large area of sort of economic, housing, environmental activity. So it's sort of trying to free up time really to focus on both policy development, which is obviously a key function of this committee, as well as scrutinising the performance of the council in an effective manner, and then still giving time to enable members of the committee to bring forward their own ideas for things to scrutinise and things to follow up. Because I think at the moment it's such a congested timetable. As we've said, we've had a couple of meetings that have neared 3 hours or gone over 3 hours, and it's really about enabling the members of this committee to clear the decks a little bit and give the new council an opportunity to really see what they want to scrutinise going forward. That was it, really.
Councillor Common.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to sort of extend a bit the point that Councillor Maynard made in the last item around actually getting presentations from external organisations, and I think that might be one thing going forward that I'd like to see more on this committee, not just from strategic organisations, but also from those who are sort of delivering services on the ground and can give this council some insight onto the impact that its policies are having on a real terms level, whether that's through the task and finish groups, and I know it worked quite well in the task and finish groups to do that, or whether it's through this committee. I think hearing more from outside rather than just sort of an echo chamber is probably going to be quite useful for this committee going forward.
Yeah, I remember one some years ago now. We had a presentation from the people who run the Pelham. That's in your patch, I think, isn't it? Well, yeah, it's in that. It's in your ward, but it's that way. But they came along one meeting and sort of gave us a run through because they was. I think we as a council gave them some money, and they came and sort of reported back, and said, well, you're giving us this, so, and told us what they was up to. So that was useful. So things have, that has happened before, so there's no reason it can't happen again. Councillor Maynard?
Following on from the comments that Ben made, I'm just acutely aware that in order to do this committee's job properly, that we need to carefully manage the workload and the expectation, both around the meetings themselves, and we've made several references to the fact that we're over 3 hours, and indeed the really good work that task and finish groups, working groups, call them what you will, have done over the years, over the history of scrutiny at Rother. The only other comment I would make is we did used to do, in terms of a state of the district, we have done that in the past. When I led the council and chaired the local strategic partnership, we had a special meeting. In terms of the LSPs have had conferences more recently, but in terms of state of the district, how that used to evolve was a meeting of the local strategic partnership, so that you had, as Councillor Collins referred to, stakeholders present, but you then invited, obviously, other authorities, members of other authorities to come along, such as the leader of the county council. I can remember Peter Jones coming along to 2 or 3 of them over the years. And I just wonder whether this is the best place for a state of the district, and whether or not, in fact, a special meeting of the LSP, as Councillor Barnes also referred to it earlier, is actually a better way of doing it than actually imposing upon what is already a fairly heavy work programme of this committee. It doesn't, certainly if we put it in the place of the LSP, it doesn't preclude any member of this meeting from attending that. But I'm just thinking we've got to think of the very best vehicle for if you're going to go along with the ideas of a state of a district. And it's also, I think, about having that relationship in terms of taking that forward, that relationship between elected members and those stakeholders, because if there is a criticism of the local strategic partnership, it is where public sector partners have in the past, and frankly continue to do, use it as a reporting mechanism, and that can be a bit of a problem. And in terms of what we do here as a scrutiny committee, we've got to be very clear that the terms of reference for this committee are adhered to. So by actually having a state of the district where you invite all those stakeholders, I would think, and in my past experience, the best place for that would be a special meeting of the LSP, not of the scrutiny committee.
Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I can see where Councillor Maynard is coming from. And in some ways, if it was a reinforced meeting of the LSP, that might actually be quite a good idea, or possibly even a joint meeting. Certainly that one needs thinking about rather than simply trying to fit it into our programme. At risk of being mildly controversial, Chairman, we have two statements, and I'm not quite sure on whose authority they're made. A new strategy will be forthcoming for housing homeless and rough sleeper. Since we were really doing rather well on that strategy, I'm not at all sure why the present strategy isn't going to be developed. Why is it going to be new? What's new about it? And similarly, the environment strategy, we're in some danger of saying that all the work we've done over the last 4 years somehow has got to be replaced and there's got to be a new strategy. And I'm just wondering who took those decisions.
I think Ben can do that one.
I can comment on the environment strategy one. I think there's a recognition that the environment strategy, when it was first written, was the first environment strategy that this council had. It was very, very broad brush, without specifics, and it wasn't reflected necessarily to the climate agenda. So what we're looking at replacing it with is not an environment strategy, but a climate strategy. So one that's focused on primarily on the climate emergency as declared in 2019, and focused around activity that we can do to address that. And that's not to wholly replace the environment strategy, but we've only got limited resources, so we're choosing to focus on that, and I think that's probably the right approach given where we are, and that later down the line we can seek to broaden that out once we've started to make progress against it. In terms of the housing and the homelessness one, I think that's something to do with a legal requirement in terms of changes to the law that we are then reflecting back on that. So it's not a wholesale change. What it will do is it will take the best bits of what we're already doing, implement those into the new strategy as well. And I think it's really clear to make clear on both of those points, and any time we do it, including the new regeneration strategy that's looking to come forward. I think a lot of these things were initially written in a pre-pandemic world. We've recognised that there's been significant social and economic change since then, and that the new strategies will look to sort of take the best bits of what we're already doing, incorporate them into a new strategy going forward, and yet devise new things that we need to do to address the economy, the housing situation, and the climate agenda of today.
Yeah, I'm sure I remember Joe telling me that there was a change in the law or something. So that's all right. So that's good. Any more? Councillor Mooney, a quick one.
I'm not so sure what are we proposing to do with regard to the LSP. Are we going to receive a report from them, or are we going to get involved, or what are we going to, like is suggested? Have we decided on that?
I think what we'll do is we'll take Councillor Maynard's comments on board and seek to look at how we address that point going with the state of the district going forward. I think it's a really cracking idea, to be honest with you, and it takes it away from the work programme of this committee, but opens it up to a wider group of stakeholders and members.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry.
Good. Right. Well, Councillor Cortell, do you want the final word?
Yeah, I've already won.
As a Central Ward councillor, one thing that keeps rearing its head in a fairly hostile way is the litter strategy. And I'm looking at it under the list of items for consideration on page 33, and the last page. And I'd personally like to suggest that is added to the items for consideration at the June meeting, because I believe fairly soon after that we'll have to renew the litter contract with NES or end the litter contract with NES. And I think that this committee should have the chance to discuss that and not just leave it to the executive.
We'll have the annual work programme setting meeting prior to the first committee in the new council. So don't we not? Oh no, because we have the issues from the doorstep, don't we? So yeah, you're right. But we'll make sure we'll make sure we bring it up, and it might be something that would be more appropriate for, say, a task and finish group or something like that if we're looking at the NES contract as an example. So I've done not to feed people with ideas or anything, but we'll make sure we mention it to the next chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you very much, Ben.
You want the final word.
No, but litter, I'm reminded every day about it. And we, as a parish council, have volunteers roaming the streets, picking up litter. And I think we should encourage them in every possible way, because we've got enough on our plate besides getting involved in litter picking. So I think it's got to come locally. In other words, under pride of place. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
There is a problem with, we, like Martin, our parish has a litter picking up. There is a real problem with disposal afterwards. And so I do think we need to clarify the attitude of the council to these parishes that collect litter, because I was told that if we collect it and then dump it, we are in fact, even if we put it in the right place, somehow we are actually criminal.
That sounds a bit harsh. I can only speak from my patch, and in Canberra, I know that we obviously the Biffa boys in Canberra have got a shed load of litter to pick up on busy weekends, but they have said, you know, if the village does a litter pick, contact them and they'll come and pick it up, no bother, you know, as a give back. So whether they do that across the district, I don't know, but it might be worth a phone call to Richard or Deborah. If your village is going to do a litter pick, then I would say a phone call to Deborah Carnegie to sort of try and organise it, because ultimately their bloke should be out doing a litter pick. So, but if you're going to do it, then it must be beholden on them to say, well, that's easy, I'll pick up half a dozen sacks rather than walk 15 miles down this country lane. So there it is. Right. So, resolved this work programme and make recommendations. So I think we've done that. Someone to move it. Final moving by Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor John Barnes. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. What I will say before I end the meeting is, for those of you who are not standing again, that's Councillor Harmer, Chairman of Council, Councillor Cortell, Councillor Mooney and Councillor Earl Williams, who's not here, thank you for your time and attendance. For all those who are seeking re-election from whatever party, good luck, because we don't have to do it. We put ourselves in that position and hopefully we come back, and as we know, sometimes you don't. So good luck everybody, and thank you for your attendance. Meeting closed at 7:35. Thank you.